the beginning of time, there has been magic in the world. In ages past, when magic, science, and religion were one, people thought that magic of the earth made the sun rise and set. It changed the seasons and brought feast or famine. But who were the first magicians? Were they the ancient wise men who, in the light of communal fires, practiced secret rituals of healing and purification? These shamans entranced their audiences, weaving stories and performing illusions. Were they the first to realize that spellbinding and deception gave them the secret power to become the masters of mystery? Today's masters of mystery still retain the secret power to entrance and deceive. And they practice their art on a scale that the ancients could scarcely imagine. Audiences are still drawn to the light, although the flickering campfire has been replaced by the glaring neon of cities like Las Vegas. Here, every night, 365 days a year, thousands of people gather to be entertained and astounded. In venues like Caesar's magical empire, magic is big business, drawing the best performers in the world to feed the public's insatiable appetite to be spellbound. But what is it about magic that appeals to a modern audience? An audience that is by nature skeptical and well-informed. Surely most people realize when they watch a magician that they're being tricked.
Magic's a very peculiar condition, because although you realize that what's going on isn't real, you don't completely suspend your disbelief in the same way. In fact, you kind of demand to have your disbelief suspended for you. You want your disbelief unwillingly suspended. Magic is an imitation, it's a theatrical imitation of human action. But it's a theatrical imitation of impossible human action.
It appeals to, I think, all ages of people, all nationalities, all languages. I think it's probably something that's inside the human mind, maybe built into our DNA. It's just something that appeals to everybody.
Magic teaches you that life is filled with surprise. The hat was empty, and now there's a rabbit inside. Whoa! Magic also tells us that things are not always what they seem to be.
In order to keep the power that a magician holds over his audience, the mystery of magic tricks and illusions must remain closely guarded secrets.
The first rule of magic, that magicians, if they're sincere in what they're doing, is never reveal your secret. That's an oath that many of us take very seriously, because that is the way that the ancient mystery traditions have been passed on, through symbols beyond words. The word secret and the word sacred flow from the same source. And that is how the mysteries are passed on. Not through words, not even through performance magic, but through silence.
And because magic is a big business whose top stars earn millions a year, the need to protect magic secrets has become even more important. Most magicians agree that much of the universal appeal of magic springs from the constant question, how did they do that?
Magicians protect their secrets primarily for artistic reasons. Because one of the beautiful things about seeing a performance of magic is that it leaves you lots of room to think you see an event, and there's lots to think about, including how could this possibly be done in view of all the rest of my experience. I've never seen somebody really float through the air. Consequently, when I see somebody float through the air on stage and it appears to be happening, there's lots of room for me to think. It's a very intellectually stimulating art form. It's one that you can't watch passively. You can't just sit there and go, oh yeah, she's floating through the air. You just can't. It's in human nature to be skeptical.
It doesn't necessarily take a complex illusion to fool the audience. In the hands of a skilled magician, even a simple trick can be baffling.
This is a favorite trick of mine. A stack of these wooden round checkers, all resting on a center dowel rod. They happen to be right side up, but they possess a capacity, a characteristic called juxtapositional reciprocity, which makes it literally impossible to turn them upside down. Now, I've tried that for years, never succeeded. What I just did, the method I know I was using, is the trick and the props involved. What you experienced as the observer or the spectator, that's the illusion.
The real difference between a trick and an illusion is that a trick sets up an intellectual challenge between the viewer and the magician. If you figure it out, the trick, you've won. If you don't figure out the trick, you're just kind of annoyed and it's just a trick. An illusionist can take the very same trick and kind of diffuse the intellectual challenge by wrapping it in mystery, in a story, in metaphor, in symbolism, in allegory, and create a piece of theater, an enchanting theater to bring you in.
The importance of theatre to magic is well understood in the East. The keen skills and poetic beauty of Chinese and Japanese magic have long fascinated magicians in the West, but little is known of ancient Oriental magic. Beautiful illustrations show clearly impossible tricks, such as exhaling bees and turning men into frogs. These illusions, if they ever existed, are lost forever. Early travelers offered fanciful accounts of Oriental conjurers and may have brought back some of their secrets. The linking rings are thought to be Chinese in origin, but their roots are shrouded in obscurity.
Many effects of magic seem to be very old. The rings, where the magician links the rings together. This may indeed have started in China. When we look at magic history books, the first chapter is always speculation, and the second chapter is 90% speculation, and then we jump to the Middle Ages, where we posit magicians at fairs and other public gatherings. But before that, we really know very little, and that is a very distressing place for the human mind to be. And so the human mind invents history.
We must travel to ancient Egypt to find the very earliest authenticated account of a magic performance. The Westcar Papyrus, discovered in 1823, tells of a local magician who was summoned to perform before the pharaoh.
The earliest illusion of which we have any record takes us back to the time when King Cheops was building the Great Pyramid at Giza. Approximately 2600 BC.
The conjurer called Dedi performed a trick, really an illusion by the modern definition. He apparently cut off the head of a goose. The decapitated animal walked around the room until its head was miraculously restored. The ancient papyrus goes on to describe how Dedi also decapitated and restored a pelican and then an ox. The magician did, however, refuse the pharaoh's suggestion that he behead one of the royal prisoners. Nearly 5,000 years later, We can only speculate on the magical secrets Dedi used to perform this illusion. Did he have knowledge of animal hypnotism? Did he use basic sleight of hand? Or did he somehow fool the superstitious audience into thinking they had witnessed actual decapitations? At the time when Dedi was performing, most people believed in natural magic, that rivers, stones, and animals all possess spirits, some good, some evil.
It is quite clear that the primitive peoples, in witnessing an illusion or a trick, would believe that this was produced by spirit aid, and would doubtless have a great sense of awe.
Magicians have always used ignorance and superstition to baffle their audiences.
Magic was used in the ancient Greek mystery traditions, in temples. There's books with illustrations of pneumatics and hydraulics. For example, the doors of the temple, when the high priest would open them, bellows would press into the floor and fire would appear on the altar, make the fire jets flare up, creating a Wizard of Oz-like effect. Speaking statues, there would be hidden tubes in the hallways, and the statues could then give oracular messages to the devotees at the temple. So these records still exist of magic used to, let's say, kick up the energy charge of a religious ceremony.
The earliest trick of which we have a record, as opposed to an illusion, is the cups and balls. This, we know, is one of the oldest tricks ever performed, in which balls appear and disappear in the most bewildering fashion beneath inverted cups.
Though accounts of the cups and balls date from the 1st century AD, it's in the Middle Ages that the trick became universal. In that time, magicians had many varied skills and were called jugglers. These traveling performers could be found working alongside minstrels, troubadours, and acrobats. Jugglers would show up on a village green and begin delighting and deceiving the ignorant audience with displays of simple sleight of hand.
From my experience, I feel the plot of the Cups and Balls is a game of hide and go seek. There's an object of desire, and you're trying to find it. And there's surprises along the way.
Performers would amaze the audience with a repertoire consisting of 20 or 30 impressive sleight of hand tricks.
The Cups and Balls is so simple that it's terribly complex. The Cups and Balls, in its way, is an abstract piece of magic.
The disappearing balls, coupled with the magician's apparent bewilderment as they reappeared somewhere else, defied explanation.
The Cups and Balls is almost like a piece of geometry, where you're just abstracting the idea of appearing and disappearing. It has an amazingly ritualistic look to it. The plot of the Cups and Balls is all about scale. That's the whole subject of the Cups and Balls. The magician pretends that it's a big deal that the 3 balls are assembling under the cups, but the audience is likely to applaud in a half-hearted manner. The whole function of that is to accustom the audience to the size, the little size of these balls. And under cover of all of these little tricks, the magician secretly sneaks huge balls underneath the cups, and suddenly raises the cups, and there are the huge balls, and now the audience realizes what the plot was really about.
1, 2, 3. The first cup, it's empty.
In Egypt, street magicians shouted the phrase "Gali Gali" to drum up an audience. In the Middle East today, the words have become synonymous with this particular trick. Though the cups are ever present, the balls are often replaced with less manageable objects.
And now they have 3 more chicken, noch 3 kleine Küken. Ich habe eine Küken hier, noch ein Küken da, and an andere Küken here. It's going to be 5 kleine Küken. That is a swatch. Now, it's going to be 6 chickens all together, and another one over here. El vostre recipe poussant sur la table. Il y a encore un ici. Now I have 2 here, 2 there, 2 here, 1 here, 7 chickens all together.
Now, when it comes to the cups and the balls, Do magicians really think that the average non-magician believes that these balls just appeared magically under these cups? I don't think so. I think most people believe that the magician somehow cleverly got them there when I wasn't looking.
Okay, let's do some real magic. Hit it. We're happy now, like Ali Bongos from hell.
American magicians Penn and Teller have often been criticized by the magic establishment for their seemingly irreverent attitude and for so-called exposures of magical secrets. But it was their fondness for the cups and balls tradition that led to the creation of a modern alternative to the classic routine.
The cups and balls.
I've been fascinated by the cups and balls for a long time. I find that if I practice it late at night, I will stay up all night doing it. It's an insidious, dangerous kind of thing. It sets some sort of, synapses in operation that shouldn't be in operation. But I found myself sitting at diners, and at diners, I'll grab a coffee cup and I'll grab a paper napkin and I'll do really silly things. Now, let me show you my idea of a really silly thing. A really silly thing is to take the ball and put it underneath the cup. Now, that doesn't seem like much of a trick, does it? But let me show you how that trick was done. I took the ball and pretended to put it in my hand. Now, it's not really in my hand, it's really hidden in this hand. And now this non-existent ball, I then pretend to place underneath the cup. But in fact, I'm secretly sneaking the other ball under the cup at the same time. So I would sit at diners doing utterly pointless magic. Here we are, I am now simulating commonplace reality by pretending to put a ball under a cup. This could be simulated by really just putting the ball under the cup. That's how crazy I am when it gets to the cups and balls.
We're going to break 4 basic rules of magic. Now, the first rule is you never do the same trick twice. We're going to do the same trick twice. Second rule of magic is you never tip the gaff to the lay public. That means you never tell people how a trick is being done. I'm going to tell you exactly how this trick is being done.
Magicians are sometimes the easiest people in the world to fool. So when magicians heard that magicians were supposed to be really upset about our cups and balls presentation, the magicians got outraged, started writing terrible articles about us in magic magazines. Like anybody cares, 4 people read magic magazines. And it was absolutely wonderful because suddenly we had a tempest in a top hat.
The third rule of magic is you never let the audience see your secret preparation. This has got to be done backstage, out of sight, so the audience does not know what is hidden in which pocket. And the fourth rule of magic is something even Paul Daniels would agree with me on. No one in the world would argue with this. You never, ever do the cups and balls with clear plastic cups.
Now, you ask any of our audiences right after we've done this, how did they do that? They'll say, we don't have a clue. It was all too fast. Precisely.
So here's our version of the cups and balls. Take the first ball, put it in the hand of the first cup. Take the second ball, simultaneously secrete it beneath the cup, put it in our hand and show it. Take the third and final ball, put it in your hand and show it in the cup, and place it in the cup at the same time so you secrete and reveal it. Now, all step the second half, 3 cups all loaded, 3 balls on top. Center ball, please center cup. These are the side balls you put away anymore. We have 3 in the center cup. These 3 balls that come over here, and this is not juggling. This is called misdirection. For looking over here, tell us takes the final ball under. There's 1 more on either side. And of course, Mr. Barney Lime for our finish. That's the cups and balls.
I find the transparent cup routine that they do pretty magical. Even though the outer framework is about exposing it, all they've exposed is the obvious, except for that small percentage of the population who thought that the balls actually magically appeared under the cup for some strange reason.
Well, now comes the teach a trick portion of the show, folks. This is where I teach you all how to perform a magic trick. I'll demonstrate the trick so you can see what it looks like, then I'll show you how it's done so you can amaze your friends. It's a simple trick with a purple handkerchief, a little squeeze. It changes into an egg. The handkerchief jumps into the pocket. That's the trick.
Secrecy is essential to magic as a hobby or a profession because, by definition, deception, whether for good or evil purposes, assumes and requires that something is being concealed or kept secret from the objects of the deception.
That's the check. Now, I know you're thinking, okay, sure, he can do the trick. He does this for a living. I'll never be able to do it. It's really easy. Once you know the secret to the trick is right there. You use 2 handkerchiefs. Make sure they're the same color. You also need what we in magic call a magician's egg. Now, a magician's egg is not an egg that is laid by a magician. It's a wooden egg laid by a decoy. It's hollowed out. There's a little hole in the side. That's all you need to do the trick. 2 handkerchiefs and the wooden egg. Now, before you perform the trick, you have to do what we in magic call your presets. This is what you do before you come out on stage. One of the handkerchiefs goes into your pocket. The wooden egg goes into your pocket.
We get paranoid when we want to preserve something that we think is in danger of being taken away from us. In modern magic, for much of the 20th century, the focus was really almost exclusively on technique.
As you're chatting with the people in the audience, the right hand slips into the pocket, takes out the wooden egg. The audience will never notice this because they're not watching you. They're watching the people you're talking to. In magic, this is called misdirection. Bring the egg out clipped between the 2 middle fingers and the palm of the right hand. Hold your hand in a natural position. In magic, this is called palming. As a young boy, I used to practice this in Walmart. Now you're ready to start the trick as far as the audience is concerned. Slowly poke the handkerchief into the egg. In magic, this is called poking the handkerchief into the egg.
When magic is reduced to technique, then secrecy is pretty important. But when magic is about the frame around the trick, then secrecy is not as crucially important.
If someone on the side should notice the hole, whatever you do not panic, stay calm, do what I do. Remove the hole from the egg. Then pretend to crack the egg into a glass. That way you don't end up with egg on your face.
The question of secrecy is, if you know the secret of a magic effect, does that ruin it for you? Would you still pay your money to go to the magic show if you know how it's done? Well, I sometimes think that magicians are pretty much deceiving themselves, that if at the magic show we were to give out a little questionnaire at the end with all the tricks done by the magician and say, well, how were these done? I think we might be, as magicians, we might be shocked and appalled at how much of the game is pretty out there in the open anyway.
To some degree, secrecy has always been a part of magic, but in some periods it was also a liability. By the late Middle Ages, magicians in Europe began to face strong opposition from the church. At this time, belief in witchcraft and the supernatural was all but universal. In a deeply superstitious age, any miracle not sanctioned by the church was considered black magic and therefore suspect. Many magicians were threatened with execution if they did not reveal the secrets of their tricks. Sharing tricks with the clergy undoubtedly saved many magicians from being burned as witches. The years of the Inquisition by the Catholic Church imposed great difficulties on conjurers. Belief in black magic was widespread, and it took just one weak-minded person to point the finger of accusation. Many an innocent conjurer was accused of being in league with the devil.
Si dia inizio alla festa.
Despite persecution, magic was still a popular, if precarious, profession. Eventually, some magicians began to enjoy the wary patronage of wealthy landowners and the aristocracy. At this time, the itinerant magician had only a limited repertoire of tricks to perform. Playing cards were not yet freely available, and large illusions that relied on props were expensive. Magicians relied largely on sleight of hand, storytelling, and feats of natural magic. Tricks involving animals and birds were popular. Secret methods of training and mesmerizing birds into performing impossible feats have been known to magicians since ancient times. For almost 300 years, the tide of religious persecution ebbed and flowed over the magical arts. During the reign of Henry VIII of England, the penalty for conjuration was death. By the late 16th century, the persecution of witches had become a panicked bloodbath. It was this frenzy that led to the publication of the very first magic book in the English language. It was an attempt by its author, Reginald Scott, to save the lives of magicians. The Discovery of Witchcraft, published in 1584, sought to separate the real skills of the magician from the diabolical powers of witches. Of course, to do this, Scott had to reveal secrets to the public. This remarkable book of magical revelations contains illustrations of magical props, such as these trick knives.
Scott used magic tricks in order to prove that these apparent miracles were brought about purely by natural means and not by being in league with the devil, believing that this would be a very telling argument against witchcraft. And so a whole section of that book is devoted to a description of conjuring tricks, some of them still being performed to this day.
Simple explanations of powerful illusions were revealed for the first time, and Scott's crusading work saved many magicians from being burned at the stake. Magicians have long depended on their physical dexterity and sleight of hand skills to perform magic tricks. A talented magician can apparently prove the saying, "The hand is quicker than the eye."
I would define sleight of hand as the creation of magical effects through purely dexterous or manual means. It's a little easier to demonstrate sleight of hand than it is to define it. I could demonstrate it with this Queen of Diamonds. Watch it closely. This is the world's fastest card trick. That's sleight of hand.
Armed with sleight of hand skills, a magician can turn the simplest of props, like two rubber bands, into the most fascinating magical trick. A trick that can stand up to the closest scrutiny of even the most observant and skeptical audiences.
That's behind. That is in front. Is that correct?
That's correct.
No gaps, right? You can see that. There's no way can it come through there, David, right?
What? Jeez.
Can it come through the middle?
No.
It can't do that, can it?
Wow.
Thank you.
I didn't even see that.
How did you do that? Can it come through the middle?
No.
Can it do that?
Hey man, show me how to do that.
Actually, you're looking very confused about this.
I don't get it.
Sleight of hand is the kind of magic performance that depends less on special props and special mechanics and more on the acting and the physical skill of the performer. It's often considered the sort of the rock bottom test. What could you do if somebody put you naked on a beach? Could you do a magic trick for them? And in fact, there are magic tricks that you can do naked on the beach, and I've done them naked and on the beach.
To understand the complexity of Teller's life, you need to know the 7 basic principles of magic. 1, palm, to hide an object in an apparently empty hand. 2, ditch, to secretly dispose of an unneeded object. 3, steal, the opposite of ditch, to secretly obtain a needed object. 4, load, to secretly move the needed object to where it's needed. 5, simulation, to give the impression that something that hasn't happened has. 6, misdirection, to lead attention away from the secret move. And 7, switch, to secretly exchange one object for another.
I remember when I was a kid with palming. Palming means hiding something in your hand so that no one can see it, but so that your hand is still held in a very natural position. I would walk around all day long with something just palmed in my hand, and it was just sitting there very calmly in my hand. But I would do things like I would drink glasses of water. I'd walk through the kitchen and I'd say, "Hi, Mom," carefully not exposing the palm.
Looks simple, doesn't it?
To become a perfect sleight of hand artist is possible. You can get close, and it takes years. Simple sleight of hand, to roll 1 coin on your fingers will take a few months, maybe a year. I wanted to go beyond that. It took me 2 years, every day, 20 minutes to a half an hour each day, to be able to get it to a level where I no longer need to concentrate on it.
I find that one of the best tricks to practicing is to try to distract myself. That is, to do it again and again and again while listening to music, while jogging on the treadmill, or to be in the middle of washing dishes and suddenly take my hands out, dry them, and see if I can do it. Because it has to become so reflexive that I don't think about it during performance. Otherwise, performance is no fun for me or the audience.
My favorite sleight of hand artist of all time was Cardini. He invented a lot of the techniques that magicians use today, but it wasn't just that. It was the context. He had a character and he had a plot. He was a tipsy gentleman, English gentleman coming home from a society affair, and the cards that would appear in his fingers appeared by themselves. He wasn't controlling them. And then another one would appear and he would get more confused and throw it away, and it was as if he was hallucinating the whole performance, and that the magic was happening around him. And that's a story of our lives. Magic is happening around us all the time, and he was the essence of a man in a magical world.
A Welsh magician named Richard Valentine Pitchford, performing as Cardini, elevated card magic to an art form. His dexterity was so great that he could even manipulate cards while wearing gloves. Most performers today who include card magic in their act owe a debt to Cardini. Some of the manipulations and palming techniques he invented are the basis of many modern routines. Cardini was a true master of all kinds of sleight of hand. Few modern performers can match his skill with a billiard ball.
Magicians really do incredibly irrational and bizarre things all the time. Someone from another planet who'd never seen a magic show would wonder if these people were psychotic, the irrational things they do. To turn those demonstrations into an entertaining presentation, storytelling is the key that ties it together.
Yellow cotton thread, a single length which will represent the entire universe. In the stories of India, it is the god Brahma who creates the universe and all that there is. Brahma then retires, and the god Vishnu takes over, and Vishnu sustains and preserves the universe in every moment of its existence. And then, at the end of time, the god Shiva appears and dances the Tandava dance, a weird and terrible dance of fire, in which the entire material universe is destroyed in blinding light, brighter than 10,000 suns. And the universe is no more. There is only silence, vast, cosmic sleep. And out of this cosmic sleep, Brahma wakens himself again. He looks about and seeing nothing, he decides to create the universe again. And creating it, he retires, pleased with his eternal play.
Armed with dexterity, skill, and the spellbinding talent of storytelling, it's no wonder magicians have sometimes been accused of using magic for nefarious purposes.
There have always been con men in magic. If you look at the great classic painting by Hieronymus Bosch of The Conjurer, you'll see a magician entertaining with the cups and balls, but that's only half the scenario. On the other side of the painting, the real illusion is happening. The cut purse, the pickpocket is making the swindle. So here in medieval times, you see the relationship between the magician and the dark side of the magician, the shadow of the magician. When we move to present day, every day we read in the newspapers about swindlers and silver-tongued con artists and shape-shifting cheats getting caught. But there are those magicians that are really invisible, that never get caught.
Technically speaking, Martin Nash is neither a magician nor a con man. But performing as the charming cheat, he uses his agility and skill to manipulate cards and entertain.
How you do? I'd like to welcome to the show. And it's cheating time. Now, there's one question I do get asked. People say, is this an honest deck of cards? Is it marked? Is it gimmicked? Or is it tricked up? I'll be honest with you, and this is the only time I will be during the entire performance. I buy my cards in a drugstore. So as you'll see, the cards are honest. It's only the hands that cheat.
The ability to produce any card at will is only a small part of his repertoire. It's taken Nash more than 30 years to achieve an expertise for manipulating cards virtually by feel alone. It's a skill he's willing to share.
I am going to show you how to do this, but please don't use it, because if you do, as I say, I would feel very bad. In order that you can see everything, I'm going to do it with all of the cards face up. So the ace of spades is on top of the deck. Now, if you want to keep the ace for yourself, all you do is just take the second card. I mean, it's just that simple. You see, just reach and take a card. Now, if you want, you speed it up, and it'll look a heck of a lot better. But in slow motion, it's just like this. So you can see exactly how I'm getting that card, and as you speed it up, it just looks better. One thing that's always fascinated me is the simple fact that you practice in my particular field. And I guess in my life I've spent over, maybe 3,000 hours practicing to do a second deal. And when you stop and think of it, it's a little bit ridiculous because you're practicing so that nobody can see it.
Even using slow-motion replay, it's impossible to see how he manages to deal the second card from underneath the ace.
Gambling is my business, card tricks are my hobby. But if you took a real top card magician and a third-rate card cheat, the magician wouldn't stand a chance. The reason being is the two techniques are entirely different. And the card cheat, of course, he has to work under fire. Not too long ago, I was in a game, and there's one type of person I really don't like. They get very, very suspicious. And he took the 4 aces, and he placed them into 4 different parts of the deck. Now, of course, I was watching very carefully so as I would know where the cards are, the 4 aces. I did happen to notice that there was exactly 6 cards above the first ace, 3, 6. I also happened to notice there was 8 between the next, 7 between the next, and 6 between the next. So because I already know where those aces are, I can be able to deal them to myself. But then he took it one step further. He pushed the cards in flush, and then he cut the deck. Now, to make it even more difficult for me, he took the deck, and in his hands, like this, he gave the deck a shuffle. Now, of course, I have absolutely no idea as to where those aces are. 3 fellas came over. And they said, do you mind if we join the game? We said no. So that meant that we had 8 people in the game. But at that point, I happened to notice that one of them had a great deal of money. And who would have the money, sir? It's an 8-handed game. Number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Who? 4. Number 4. He must be a card player. That's one of the most difficult hands to set up. As I say, I had no idea where anything was, so I was just dealing the cards, so I'm just going to be playing by luck. Well, he happened to get a king, so I'm just playing by luck because, well, I would like to match him the spade to the spade. Now, the odds of getting a pair on the first, well, he did happen to get a pair, but that's just pure blind luck, and so I would have to reach over and get the ace of hearts for myself. Now, 3 of a kind, of course, is a very good hand, so, you know, well, I didn't expect him to, but he did, which means I had to follow with the ace of diamonds. And 4 of a kind was practically, well, it wasn't impossible for me to get it also. So for those of you who may be interested, there's a little game at my house this evening. I accept both Visa and MasterCard, so just give me a call. Thank you. When you're sitting down at the table and you're entertaining people doing quote-unquote card tricks, then you'll be using entirely different moves than you would if you were sitting at the table playing for big money. And the one thing about the card cheat, if he makes a mistake, he gets beat up. The magician, he gets laughed at. There's a big difference.
Now watch it really carefully, okay? There's the lady.
Find the Lady and 3-card Monte con games are a familiar sight all over the world. But even before you lay your money down, the odds are heavily stacked against you.
I'll do it really slow this time, okay?
If you ever see a 3-card Monte worker on the street, no matter how skillful you may be as an observer, and even if you're a professional magician, don't play the game. Because it isn't a game. They can change the rules on you at any moment.
Never bet with strangers because you're going to lose it. Wow. So thank you very much. Wow.
And in the unlikely event that somehow or other you should finally be able to get a correct win on something, as you walk away, you'll soon meet some people in an alley.
Throughout history, wherever the public gathered, both con artists and honest magicians were guaranteed a rapt audience. In the 18th century, nothing could rival the crowds and excitement of the annual fair. It was a carnival, circus, sideshow, and market all rolled into one. Fire eaters and snake handlers vied for attention, while contortionists and midgets, giants and sword swallowers displayed their skills and natural talents to astounded onlookers. But of all these competing spectacles, the magician was truly the star.
The greatest magician of the early 18th century was a man called Isaac Fawkes. We know very little of his origins. It's suspected that he might have been a Londoner, but he came to great prominence in the early 1720s. And he was to be found performing at the major fairs and in various taverns.
Isaac Fawke's masterpiece was the famous egg bag. By means of sleight of hand, he would produce an astonishing succession of eggs and coins for an apparently empty bag. It cost 1 shilling to be entertained by Mr. Fawkes. The first true star of the art, he eventually became the highest paid magician of his day, with a deeply devoted following. When Fawkes died in 1731, newspapers reported he left a fortune of £10,000, worth almost $1 million today, further proof of his popularity. But it would take another 100 years before magicians realized they too could hold an audience for more than a trick or two. With the rise of the theatre, magicians were quick to combine illusions with sleight of hand, stage effects and lighting. A new era had dawned. Magicians had found a new home and a new audience eager to be entertained. They now dressed in formal clothes, just like the theatre-going public. Elevated above the juggling and fire-eating of the fairgrounds, the magicians now held centre stage. New illusions and tricks were invented, especially for theatres, and for the first time, magicians found themselves at the top of the marquee. One of the first magicians to establish himself in the theatre was Scottish performer John Henry Anderson. Born in 1814, he started his career as the Caledonian conjurer, and later found fame as the Great Wizard of the North.
He certainly made a tremendous impression and arrived in London in 1840 at the New Strand Theatre. There he was advertising his gorgeous silver apparatus, and certainly his stage was eye-filling. He performed most of the standard tricks of the day, Chinese rings, birds being produced from a cauldron, and he was not really an innovative magician. But he was a great showman, and he was also the first of the very great publicists.
The innovation of people in the 19th century, like John Henry Anderson, was to perform in a more natural setting. The stage setting was more like an elegant drawing room, and the magician was performing basically in formal evening attire. It was really the birth of the modern genre of magic.
Over the years, however, magicians who are very often not very bright when it comes to understanding the basic meaning of things said, tailcoat, I guess that's what a magician is supposed to wear. So nowadays, when an audience comes to the theater, well, at its dressiest in a business suit, and at its most casual in jeans, magicians are still walking out on stage in tailcoats from the 19th century. They've completely lost the sense of what the costume was for. It's mystifying, really.
Though John Henry Anderson is scarcely remembered today, his legacy has lasted for more than 150 years. His pioneering style of showmanship paved the way for thousands of performers around the world. The larger-than-life demeanor that began with Anderson created a market for magic that has grown steadily ever since. Audiences demanded bigger and better shows, and magicians were happy to oblige. The late 19th and early 20th centuries brought the golden age of stage magic, with magicians playing to packed houses around the world. Magicians became household names, some still remembered, others long forgotten. But they all live on, forever preserved on dusty theatre posters and playbills. The growth of the movies in the 1930s led to the rapid decline of stage magic. In moving pictures, all manner of magic was possible. Only the true masters of mystery were still guaranteed to hold an audience spellbound. Today, the demand for magic has returned. The growth of entertainment capitals like Las Vegas, coupled with the mass appeal of television, has created a new generation of stars. These masters command great fees and a global following that the magicians of the past would find difficult to comprehend. Even today, magic still satisfies a primeval desire in all of us to be amazed and entertained. The bright neon of Las Vegas has replaced the light of the campfire, and a new generation begins to explore the mysteries of magic.